Welcome to Talking School Sports. I'm Neil Rollings. I'm joined by Natasha Broomfield-Reid of Diverse Matters, and you work with organisations, Natasha, to improve their awareness of diversity and inclusion. Is that right? Tell us exactly what you do.
Yeah, that's right. We support any organisation, whether it's a case of education, raising awareness around different issues, whether it's, at the moment in this current climate, race is very important, and raising people's awareness about that, which I know we're going to talk about a bit further on. But we talk about the whole range, whether it's disability, age, lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans issues, and even those people who haven't done anything at all, just starting them to think about why is diversity and inclusion relevant to all organisations, and how it can benefit you if you start to consider how it can sort of make you more successful. There's loads of research. McKinsey is the one that people mostly reference, called Delivering Through Diversity, and it highlights, as well as lots of other research actually, that shows that the more greater diversity of teams you have, the more successful, more creative, more innovative, and have greater outputs as well.
So you're suggesting that organisations deliberately court diversity. It's not an accident. It's a
Say that
proactive.
again, sorry.
You're suggesting that organisations deliberately aim to be diverse because there's a benefit in it.
I think people are starting to realise that there is a benefit. A lot of people necessarily don't, which is why sometimes you might have organisations where they're not diverse at all because they've not looked into it. So, as well as doing a training, we also do things like audits. So we will work with, whether it's schools or colleges in education, or whether it's other wider organisation working across all sectors. And we can do an audit with them. We look at all functions. So if we're talking about education and college, we'll look at the curriculum, to leadership, the student experience, pupil experience, and a whole range of other areas. We look, are there any gaps? Is every child get an equitable learning experience, whether it's education, pastoral? And then we also look at the teams. Is everybody in the team getting the same opportunities to achieve, to develop, and things like that? So we do an audit, and we do even developing policies and procedures. There's lots of things we do within the organisation, but the main aim is to get more people to recognise that diversity and inclusion does make a difference. Historically, if you looked at this, people would not, I'd say, as many people would not recognise the importance of it. That's the Back in the day, I suppose, if you want to use the term, people saw um, inclusion or equality as a tick box. It's thinking that, oh yeah, it's about doing or saying the right thing. It's not about that. It's about, okay, how much, what are we doing to make sure that people often get the same experience? And we know from what's highlighted recently that people's lived experience can be very different. A black person's experience to somebody, somebody from black, Asian, minority ethnic communities experience somebody who's non-BAME may have a completely different experience. And so it's just, this, or what's happened recently has highlighted that for people, that they might not have acknowledged it before, that there is different experience often within, whether it's jobs, whether it's education. Unfortunately, if you're black, Asian, minority ethnic, you're more likely to be employed. You're more likely, even when you go to university, to have more challenges in terms of even your grades, even those having disciplinaries in job. There are unfortunately some disadvantages for people of colour, people who are from the black, Asian, minority ethnic community, because and that's one thing people are sort of recognising now.
And are they accidental disadvantages? Are these things that people think are not there but are?
You mean like organisations or colleges or
Yes.
schools sort of thing?
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think
I mean,
most organisations would claim that they were
yeah,
diverse,
yeah.
inclusive. Is that not the
I think
case?
it's I think it's a bit of both. I can't do a sweeping statement and say that, oh my gosh, every organisation is awful, or every organisation is great. There's a mixture. You have some managers or some organisations, leaders, like, no, we need to make a difference. We know that we're not as diverse as we should, and that we need, what steps can we take to remove those barriers? You may go some other organisations and go, well, no, we're actually recruiting finally. It's just that people aren't coming to us. And I think we need to stop that term. And people use this term all the time, hard to reach people. You've got to make somebody want to work for you. What are you doing in your messaging, in your recruitment packs, in your organisation? What are you doing to let people know that you are welcome into all communities? And that's what people aren't necessarily doing. They're thinking they can do things the same way every time, and then wonder why nobody wants to work for that organisation, or the demographics of that organisation don't change. And sometimes you need to do something a little bit different, because like you say, if you're disabled, black, Asian minority, I think if you're lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, for example, you are more likely to have barriers to get into work in the first place. So something's got to encourage you to say, well, I'm going to go for that, and that looks a good place to work for me.
And I know you work in education as well. Do you find, is there hidden racism in education?
I wouldn't say it's hidden racism. I think there's people know now that to say certain phrases or comments, look out, out comments that we know, I won't say them here. They know that that's blatantly racist. They'll know what not to say, like outwardly. They'll know that that is the wrong thing to do. So I think racism has changed in that way that certain terms that may have been used historically, we're not seeing any of that, because they'll know that is racist, or that is sexist, that is homophobic, biphobic, or whatever. But what often happens are things like microaggressions, micro behaviours, they're subtle behaviours, or it's a structure. What people talk about is structural racism. So it's not about somebody saying the wrong thing, but it's that there are barriers to actually getting in there in the first place. So it might be a microaggression, might be, for example, or micro behaviour might be that somebody who is different from a different ethnicity or a different community may not have as much engagement. There might be a team meeting and everybody else is engaged, but that person is isolated, or that person not been given eye contact. It's not blatantly saying I don't like you, but they might be having micro behaviours or microaggressions which highlight it in a different way. So they're not always as obvious, but they happen. So it's not a case of being hidden, but it's less obvious. It's what they call sort of modern racism, everyday race. It's not the old type where somebody knows not to say a certain word.
Obviously, people don't use that language because, as you say, they know that that's wrong. But you can change people's language, you can change people's behaviour in the workplace, but can you change their hearts and minds with this kind of work?
I think with any of this work, you're always going to get the ones who get it and go, yeah, I really value inclusion and diversity. You're going to get the ones who are on the fence that will, once they raise awareness and education, and they go, oh yeah, I get it now, I understand. People might, like I say, the whole thing around George Floyd has made people realise, oh my gosh, it is a different experience. You're all more, if you're a person who's from an ethnic minority, you're all more likely to get stopped by the police. You're all more likely to get stopped in a shop, or those sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's highlighted all that type of thing. So I think that I forgot, what was the question again? Sorry, I missed that bit. What did you say? I was getting all excited.
Can you change the way people?
That's it. So you get.
Can you change hearts and minds?
That's it. Apologies. So there's some people who get it straight away. Some people who are like, well, I might need a bit of awareness, and things like, I know George Floyd and things happen with Black Lives Matter has made people go, oh my gosh, I've noticed that I didn't think about that before, and now they're realising, oh, there is a difference, and they can become educators. And I would say to anybody, do what you can to learn more. We can all be educated more, and the more you learn, it can reduce how we think about people, how we may stereotype or discriminate against people. But then, with anything to do with attitudes and values, you're going to get a small group of people or a number of people, I wouldn't want to put a number on it, who will go, I don't get it at all. And you've got to understand that. And I think but to me, if they're working in a working environment, and the ethos should be that they value inclusion and they treat people appropriately in their fare, they should, at least in the workplace, be treating people fairly, without bias, without discrimination. So I would love to say that everybody in the whole world would get to a place where there'd be no bias, no discrimination. We're never going to have that, but people should know that they should behave appropriately and use fair practices within the workplace. And if they're not, there should be challenge, and there should be appropriate policies and procedures in place. So if something's not being done, they've got policies to follow up and address those issues.
And you talk about the current sort of Black Lives Matter campaign. Do you think that's having an impact? Is that changing things, or is it?
I think it has had an impact. For me, it's how long it will have an impact. So it has raised a lot of issues. It has brought, like I said, a lot of people have had a realization that, oh my gosh, the experience is very different, and there are a lot of people who face struggles that probably people hadn't realised. So yes, I definitely have seen a shift change. For me, it'll be in a year's time, in a 2 years' time, Are people still going to be saying we need to change? Are people still going to be saying we need to change our practice? Are we going to be seeing greater diverse representation on boards, on senior leadership teams, and governors in organisations? That's going to be the test. Is what happens next. And for me, it's about action. Everybody can sit there and put a little, put a statement. We support Black Lives Matters. But for me, is but what are you doing? What action are you taking to be anti-racist, to take, to support the agenda, but also make real changes in your organisation?
And when you see people sort of kneeling before sports events, at say high-profile events, is that going to carry on forever, or is there going to be a day when people decide they're not doing that anymore?
Neil, I couldn't even tell you. I don't mean to me. It's a mess. It's a message, isn't it? It's a message that's being shown about their support, and they understand that the difficulties that people's face. I couldn't tell you if it's something that's going to last or not. But that, to me, that's somebody's choice if they want to do that. And also, the thing is, as long as they're doing some action, what are you doing? For those who even aren't kneeling, if you're not kneeling, but what are you doing? What are you doing to make a change, to make a difference, to actually start changing? Unpicking the structural racism and other issues that is happening. What can you do? Unpick it and look at what you can do to change an organisation for the better.
And these tokens you see before sports events like that, is that a good thing, do you think, or is it just a fashion?
It can't harm. No, I think it can't harm, because if it's raising the profile, it's raising the profile. So that's no different to people wearing pride, Pride Month, wearing rainbow. You've got your rainbow laces, haven't you, in sport, and you've got those sort of activities which are in place to support, show they support the LGBT plus community. So there's nothing wrong with whether it's kneeling, whether it's having a Black Lives Matter armband or T-shirt. A lot of people, aren't they? They're wearing them on their shirts and things. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, because at least it shows we support it, we understand, we embrace it. But for me, again, it's like, but what are you doing apart from wearing a T-shirt? What are you doing apart from kneeling? So to me, it's brilliant because it raises it and makes it. You look at you wouldn't have imagined the amount of protests that we would have had, how we've had over the last few months. People a year ago would not have imagined it, would they? So the fact that so to me there is a change, but it's, to me, what are you doing next? Because there is a lot to do still.
And do they have to wear those T-shirts forever now then?
Not, I can't even say, Neil. That's not for me to say. That is something that people, if that's their choice, if they think it's not. I mean, at the end of the day, racism is not time. It's not ending, is it? So it's not really a timed thing. So it's really up to each sports team, whatever they feel they would like to do. I wouldn't want to say you should wear it. If you don't wear it, it doesn't mean that you're not doing anything, because there could be lots of organisations. I work with lots of organisations who are doing loads of stuff and they're not promoting it and saying Black Lives Matter, because they say, well, I want to or do a bit more before I promote it. So it doesn't mean if you're not wearing it, if you're not kneeling, that you don't support it. There could be a lot of work going on within the organisation to actually address it and be doing lots of some really good work.
Do you think sport's got a role in dismantling racism, racial intolerance?
I think sports can play a part in raising awareness, definitely, because a lot of people go to sports. I know we're not really going now, but in COVID, but pre-COVID, a lot of people go to sports events, and a lot of people from all walks of life, all diverse, different backgrounds, different affluency, the whole lot. So I think if you're going to raise awareness, it can't be a bad thing. But I think, at the end of the day, for me, again, it's like, what are people doing in their homes? What are people doing in their workplaces? So, yes, they can play a part in education, but what they also need to do is, again, in each sports their arena, unpick what they're doing. Are there any barriers? Because sport is awful. I don't want to say, but sport is awful in terms of representation. Football managers, coaches, hardly any people who are from Black, Asian, minority ethnic, communities, senior management.
But plenty of players.
Exactly. So that doesn't make sense, because really and truly it should be representative of the players, at least, into management, and it's not happening. So at the end of the day, we should be doing, for me, those sports organisations, teams should be looking at, okay, we support Black Lives Matter, but what can we do to enhance our practice? Look at our leadership, look at how we recruit, like I said earlier, look at our policies. Are they strong enough? Are we challenging? People have got better, haven't they? But are they challenging people who attend and they're being racist, sexist or homophobic or whatever? So it's about the policies and practices that they're doing to sort of raise the issue, making sure they're doing their bit to make sure it's acknowledged. We will not accept or we will not tolerate any inappropriate behaviours.
And what should schools do to promote diversity? How can schools contribute to this message?
I think, for example, schools are really good at SEN. Special education
Mhm.
needs. They know it's quite, most schools know. We know we've got, whether they've got a care plan or whatever. We know this is something we need to do. We will support the children. So they think and pupils. So I think in terms of pupils, really good. In terms of inclusion, in terms of disability or additional needs. But what schools could do is the same I do with other organisations. Is the curriculum reflective? Often a lot of people's histories are erased. What's the curriculum saying? Is it providing a broad UK history, for example? Is pastoral support supporting all backgrounds, all experiences, all faiths, for example? Are teachers getting an opportunity of all backgrounds and abilities to rise in the ranks and be head teachers or deputy heads? Again, if you look at headships, deputy head, senior management are very underrepresented in all aspects of equality, whether it's race, gender, age. A lot of it is underrepresented, not just, we're talking about BLM and Black Lives Matter, but in all aspects. So to me, I'd be looking at all those aspects, what they're doing, and making sure that they are fair and representative. And I'm sure that they could do, any organisation or any school or college that did an audit, I'm sure they would find gaps in what in the fact that they would find barriers that they probably didn't. It's not intentional in a lot of this, but have probably realised, actually, we didn't realise that is providing a barrier for this community, that's providing a barrier for that community. So it's about making sure you assess what you do, review what you can do, what can we do to bridge these gaps.
And should we be throwing the statues of colonial masters into the harbour, or?
I'm not going to comment on that. I think that is, I'm not going to condone any sort of behaviours like people might say is inappropriate or shouldn't be doing. But at the end of the day, people are at a point right now where they have probably had enough. Is it? I think Martin Luther King, or there was a statement that says, "A riot is the voice of the unheard." Yeah. So people is the voice of the unheard. If you've been constantly had the door shut in your face, you've constantly not been able to get a job because you're colour, if you've constantly not been not been able to access education, if you've not had all those opportunities, something's going to happen. There's going to be an uprising of some sort. So I'm not saying I agree or disagree. I'm just saying that you can understand anger needs to happen. So with anger, not everybody's going to sit quietly and go, yes, this is not right. And people will say, well, that is the best way, and it might be the best way. But people have been trying that way for many, many years. People have been saying, there's racism, there's sexism, there's homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, and a lot of people haven't been listening. So maybe for some people they may feel that's something that people are going to listen because of that. And also the statues that have been pulled down have been one where there are people who have been glorified as being great people, where there could have been slave masters, they could have been known for being very discriminatory. So there's that as well, that should they have statues that provide a really, that have done a lot of negative things in their past and discrimination. I don't know if you saw as well, went around social media, but one of the highest medals that are given out, in society is a white man standing on a black man. So there's a lot of things that people aren't realizing that are happening as part of our history that people have not questioned or queried or didn't know anything about, because until now people probably thought now is the time to say these things, because before people often weren't listened to.
So should the statues be removed in an orderly fashion, or should they be left there? Is there a place for those?
I honestly, I don't want to comment on that. I think it's not for me to say.
Oh, brilliant. Natasha, thanks very much. Really
Honestly,
appreciate your
on.
time, and congratulations on
Sorry.
everything you've done.